life. We love you, and we love what you do, who you are, and the ways that you impact this community and this world for the sake and the kingdom of Christ. So thank you for being who you are and what you do, and for giving us the honor to serve you. So each year at this time, we recount the year past. I spend some time in what I call the State of the Church address, kind of looking back at what we've done in the past year. And I think it's really amazing to do that. It's going to be long. It's going to be pretty picture intense, and we'll move through it. But there's a really neat thing that happens. You know, a lot of us have lived through this past year, and many of these events that you'll see pictured and that I'm going to talk about, you've experienced and you've been a part of, and you know, you've probably forgotten about them. But when you sit down and you look at a whole year in one fell swoop, you see a bigger picture than you do when you're living each moment by moment. It's the same thing that happens when you read Scripture. When you read a little verse, or 2 verses, or 3 verses, it's different experience than when you read a whole chapter or when you read the whole book. If you really want to get a concept of who Jesus is and the impact that he had in the world, sit down with one of the Gospels and read through it from beginning to end in one setting. And you see a whole different side to him than if you just read a little snippet at a time. And so that's kind of what happens. That's what's going to happen for us today. And it was really a neat experience this week as I was putting it together, to look back and reflect, and then to think about the power and the magnitude of the impact that we've had for Jesus here in this community and in our world. And we're just a little church. It's amazing. And so this morning, I'm going to invite you on that journey with me. And all year long, I just throw pictures into a file. And then when I get to this point, I just go to that file and I start pulling them out and putting it together. Before I begin with the pictures, there are 2 passages of Scripture that are really important, and they form the foundation of all that we do and all that we are here at Community of Joy. And they're a part of our method of being a church, and I just want to share them with you today as we begin. In Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3, and in that whole context there, we see God about to send Abram before he became Abraham. Same guy, he just had a name change. He was Abram, and God changed his name to Abraham. But he's about to send him and his wife Sarai off to this destination unknown. And it's not a pleasant journey. It's a fearful moment. It's a moment of them needing to trust deeply in God. And God says to Abram and Sarai at this moment in their life, he says, I will bless you. And he says, you will be a blessing to others, and all families on earth will be blessed through you. And that, brothers and sisters, is where we get this concept that we, through Abraham, through God's blessing to Abraham, and then that blessing to the world, we are blessed by God so that we can be a blessing to others. Now, I know that's not the first time you've heard me say that phrase. It's here. It's above our back door. It probably has blended into the environment every time you walk out. It's over your head when you walk out through those 2 doors. It says, blessed by God to be a blessing. Who will you bless today? We believe here at Community of Joy that we are blessed by God so that, not so we can hoard it, not so that we can pat our backs and feel good about ourselves, but so that we can share that blessing with others, so that we can bless others. And that's a really important part of who we are and what we do here as a congregation. And the other important passage of Scripture that I want to talk about today is that passage that Pastor Sharon read this morning. Its larger context is after Jesus comes back from the dead, the resurrected Jesus appears to his disciples, and he breathes on them and gives them the gift of the Holy Spirit, and they're out trying to figure out who they are and what they're about now that Jesus is no longer bodily with them. And now that they have this incredible gift of the Holy Spirit. And so they're out teaching and working in the community. They're gathering in homes and gathering in the temple and studying scriptures, and they're singing praises. And Luke tells us that many miraculous signs and wonders were performed by the early church. and that they met together and they pooled their resources and they met needs and they were an agent of blessing in their community as Jesus intended them to be. Because Jesus said before he left, he said, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. And so he sends them out into the community and the world to be a major force of blessing and impact. And I just absolutely love this phrase in verse 47, where it says, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all people. Now, that's not a phrase that we hear very often about the church these days, unless you're talking about community of joy. And I'm not bragging about you. I'm just stating facts. It is a part of what we do here in this congregation. We seek to share blessings so that we can create goodwill in our community and our world. Typically, the way the church rolls, and I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about other churches, the way the church in the past has rolled is we tend to point fingers at people who are different from us. We tend to push people down and put people down and push people out to the edges and the margins. And that's not who we are as a congregation. That's not who the early church was. They were meeting together in homes and in the temple. They were pooling resources and meeting needs and sharing the love of Christ widely. And they experienced the goodwill of all people because they were doing that. And I believe, brothers and sisters, that as we do what we do, as we bless others, as we share the blessing that we have experienced in our lives, we create goodwill in this community, in our world, and it's changing lives in huge and significant ways. And that's what I want to walk you through and show you the ways in which we as a congregation in this past year have impacted lives and created goodwill, because that's what we're about. We're not about pointing fingers. We're not about pushing people down or putting people out. We're about blessing. We're about sharing blessing. We're about creating goodwill in our community and in our world. We began this in 2016, but we continued it in the early part of 2017, and then we kind of fell away and we didn't continue with it. And I'd like to see us get back to it, but we joined forces with a couple of local churches, a conglomeration of local churches from all ethnicities, from all walks of life as churches go, here in Salisbury, to be a part of a 13-state-wide initiative called 50,000 Souls that gathered food, and every month we brought the food together and we put them in boxes of blessing. And then we went out into the neighborhoods, in neighborhoods that some of us have never been into, in neighborhoods where there's a huge need, and we knocked on doors and we said to the people as they came to the door, we are here to tell you that God loves you, and here is a box of blessing for you that we want you to have. And then we offered to pray for these families. And then after we did that and after we did the distribution, we gathered in the circle and we hooped it up and we made lots of noise and we prayed and we sang and we prayed God's blessing on that neighborhood. And it was a beautiful thing when we went to different neighborhoods and when we joined with these churches here in Salisbury, churches that we don't normally associate with, and be a part of that kingdom movement of being a blessing in our community. Since 2008, we have been faith-based partners at Pinehurst Elementary School, and we've been sowing seeds in Pinehurst Elementary School for all these years, almost 10 years. This is 2018. This fall, it will be 10 years that we've been a faith-based partner at Pinehurst Elementary School. It's a wonderful thing that our county allows to have happen in schools, and the school would tell you that. Now, that doesn't normally happen. The schools don't usually say, we love to have churches involved in our life, unless they're a Christian school. But public schools don't do that. But because we create goodwill, because we are agents of blessing in the life of Pinehurst, we experience that. So the last several years, we've gathered every year on the first day of school to have a circle of prayer, to pray for our staff, the staff there, the students, the families, the school, the administrators. And here is this year's prayer gathering outside around the sign. It is made up of staff from Pinehurst, administrators from Pinehurst, teachers from Pinehurst, people from the community, people from Community of Joy. It's a beautiful thing, and it continues every Wednesday morning before school begins in their gym. We have a time of prayer. I go there, and sometimes some of you join me, and it's a beautiful thing when we are there, and we're welcomed in. I didn't have to ask. They asked us to come and do that. You see, when you create goodwill in a community, when you create goodwill in the lives of others, you get invited in places that the church doesn't normally get invited to go. And so it's a beautiful thing. Some of the other things we do at Pinehurst, this is the new administration. And we've now seen our third set of administrators in the almost 10 years that we've been there. And I don't like that about Wicomico County. And I keep telling the superintendent, stop that foolishness. Let us develop relationships with these administrators and let them develop relationships with their community and their school and keep them where they are. But so this year we got a new principal who's right in front of me, Mrs. Rando, who is in the black, and then a new vice principal, Mr. Smith, who's in the middle, the only other male besides me there that you don't know. And then Miss Troiano has been the dean of students there forever. They haven't moved her. She's going to retire from there because she's retiring. This is her last year, or maybe next year. She's very close to retiring, and I don't think they'll move her. So we take them at the beginning of the year, all kinds of school supplies and book bags, and this is them receiving that. And I didn't know what it was going to be like with new administrators. I had a great relationship with previous administrators, and I didn't know how it was going to be. But when I went in to meet them the first time, they had already been told about us, and they were eager and ready and willing to invite us into their lives. And that's what happens when you create goodwill in a community. That's what happens when you're an agent of blessing. You get invited in, the church gets invited into places where it doesn't normally go. So one of the things we do, and we try to find all kinds of ways to do it regularly, is to just say to the teachers, because they have a hard job. They have one of the hardest jobs in our country. They have to raise children that parents aren't raising. They have to discipline children that have never been disciplined. They have to put up with kids that are up, walking around, jumping and hooting and hollering and carrying on because they can't sit in their seats because they have ADD and they're not being medicated and or whatever. They have a really tough job, and it gets really hard. And so we, as the faith-based partners of Pinehurst, like to encourage these teachers in any way we can and say thank you. And you're making an impact in this community, and we recognize that, and we appreciate you. And so this is just a small gesture, but this is a thank you pack that we gave them at the beginning of last year in January. A handwritten note card that we made, and it'd be a blessing Sunday. And we hand addressed and prayed for the teachers as we did that. And in it was some pencils, some erasers, some dry erase markers, a thing of tissues, and a Germex. And this is a picture I got off of Facebook that one of the staff had posted about us. It's not a picture I took. And so, you see the impact that you have. That pack probably only cost $6 or $7, and yet it touched their lives in huge ways. Then we always try to have some kind of a teacher appreciation meal. And this fall, we did a fall treats gathering where we just put out a spread of sweets and say, we love you, we appreciate you, we recognize the powerful things that you do in our community. And so, and then we always have a cookie feast. I didn't have a picture of that, but that's like a deathly thing for a diabetic. We just lay out 13, 14 dozen different kinds of cookies, dozens and dozens of them. It takes the whole boardroom table of cookie feasts for cookie feasts. And they said to me one time, don't ever stop that. We love that. And we always do it in May. And I don't know why I don't have pictures of that, but I didn't have pictures of that. But it's a beautiful thing. And then the other thing we did at Pinehurst, and this is absolutely amazing. In one Sunday's time, I asked for $400 was the price I was given. We ended up spending $505. I asked for donations so that the choir could have shirts to wear to a downtown Salisbury Christmas carol thing that they were doing, and we got to have our name on the back because we were the only ones that were sponsored. The music teacher, who I don't think is churched, reached out to me and said, hey, I've reached out to lots of businesses in town asking them to sponsor this shirt, and I've heard from no one. No one's responded. And I'm wondering if I need to raise $400 was what she told me at the time. And it turned out it was $505. And she said, I need to raise this money and I don't have a lot of time to do it. I wondered if you guys can help. And so I came in one Sunday and I made the presentation, and I don't know how much money I had before I left, but by the time the day was over, I had offers of almost $1,000 toward that need. And it touched their lives. And then I said to her, we would really like to, in the spring, we do what we call Joy Fest. It's a barbecue for the neighborhood, and there's no strings attached, and we always like to include the Pinehurst families. We wondered if you would come and sing at that event. And she said, absolutely, I'd love to. I'm always looking for avenues to sing in the community. Since when in a normal world, in the world we live in, not in a normal world. In a normal world, it happens all the time. But in the world we live in, since when does a teacher get excited about coming and performing at a church with a school choir, a public school choir? Yeah, I expected to catch flack for that. But because we've been sowing seeds in the lives of Pinehurst for 8 years, 10 years, almost 10 years since 2008, we're creating goodwill. And nobody raised a bit of flack about Community of Joy being on the back. It was just a natural thing to have happen. It's beautiful, brothers and sisters. And then, Bob, this guy in the back, and I, we've been sowing seeds into these two little brothers' lives since they were in pre-K and kindergarten. Now they're in second and third grade, and we spend an hour with them every week. And all we do is play games. We're their mentors, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful, rich experience for us. And if you have an hour a week that you can share and give during the school day, ask your employer if they'll let you off. Go to a school. You'll be blessed beyond measure. It's the best thing you've ever done. To spend time in their lives. This was Bob and I at Christmas. We took them some Legos. They always like to play Legos. We took them Legos and a soccer ball. They're very athletic and they love Legos. And so we went to their house and gave them these gifts, and they sat on our lap and we had this picture taken. And then one Sunday they showed up here. They usually go to church somewhere else, but Mom said the boys were asking, could they come to Mr. Bob and Pastor Martin's church? And so here they came, and they surprised. But that was a Sunday Bob wasn't here, and so we took this picture so that we could prove to Bob that they were here. It's just a real blessing in our lives. And then being faith-based partners at Pinehurst gets us invited into settings that you would never imagine a church getting invited into. This was the opening day celebration of this last year. 2017 school year at Wicomico County, where they rented the Civic Center, and every staff member and every teacher in Wicomico County came to hear the superintendent, Donna Hanlon, do a presentation and kick off an exciting new year. And so as your pastor, as the faith-based partner of Pinehurst Elementary School for almost 10 years, I was invited to come and be a part of the dignitaries. And so I got to sit on the front row. That's where they had a seat reserved for me, right next to Mike Dunn. He's the guy on his fist. Mike Dunn is the chairman and CEO, or president and CEO of Greater Salisbury Committee. And then the mayor of the day that's a girl with the blonde hair. She was mayor for the day. And then Mayor Jake Day was sitting there. I don't know who the other lady is, but there we are, the church, getting invited into a public school rally, and they had a slideshow going on about us, and they read a little blurb about us, and it was just beautiful. When we create goodwill in our community, when we live lives of blessing, amazing things happen. And then that afternoon, the school rented 2 buses, and they brought all the staff members around. They were touring the neighborhoods where their children come from. And one of the neighborhoods is where the Camden Community Garden is, in summer lunch. And summer lunch was going on. And so they came to the Camden Community Garden, to the playground, and they got off and they asked me to talk about the work that we're doing both at the garden and at the summer lunch program, and then what was happening or will be happening. Hopefully in May or June, the community center will be opening, and we have a huge role in seeing that happen. And so they asked me, and there I am talking to the staff, many of whom I know and many of whom are new and I didn't know, and they didn't know about us. And so I always begin those talks with the church, and I talk about how the church, our desire as the church is to be an agent of blessing in the community and to create goodwill. And that's what I talk about. And so I began there, and there's the opportunity. And at the end of that day, I had a teacher come up to me, and I don't know who she is. I gave her a card. She never contacted me, but I thought it was really cool that she was moved. And I don't know if something will come of this, but she said, my husband and I are just putting up a greenhouse, and we're putting up a bigger greenhouse than I think we'll ever use. And I can't imagine why we're doing it. But God just stirred my heart today, and I need to have a business card of yours because I would like us to grow your plants next spring. I don't know if anything will ever come of that, but I thought, isn't it cool that when you are an agent of blessing, people begin to see that and want to respond in like ways. If that happens, that would be a huge blessing. If it doesn't, I've got a back pocket idea and it's going to work out and it's fine. But I just thought, wow, she was touched by what we're doing. And then every once in a while, usually twice a year, we send a group of people down to prepare and serve the meal at God's Kitchen, which is at Grace United Methodist Church. Usually have 125 to 175 people that come through the doors, and we get to bless with this meal. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And there's some of the crew preparing it. Then every time there's a fifth Sunday in a month, and it usually happens 4 times a year, we have what we call Be a Blessing Sunday. Be a Blessing Sunday, I think we are in our 5th year of Be a Blessing Sundays. We cancel worship in both of our worship gatherings, and we share in projects inside that go out, and then we go out and do projects out in the community. And so here we are making bags, welcome bags for our shelter guests last year. And then there we are making scarves for our shelter guests last year. There's a team that went out to work on trail maintenance at the bike trails, the mountain bike trails around City Park downtown in Salisbury. There's a group that's making some, not sure quite what they're doing there, but they're doing some kind of a project as a blessing. There's a group making what kind of bags were those that we made for the Alzheimer's Association? They were sensory bags, sensory stimulation bags. And the Alzheimer's Association president came here, and she was thrilled to have those bags. And all they were sand in baggies, taped up with some things, shells or whatever in there to encourage Alzheimer's patients to stimulate their senses a little bit. There we are painting kindness rocks. We've done that twice, and they go out from here and touch people's lives. Last Sunday, Kelly took one from the back there. There's a bunch back there. Ariana's not here, so I can say this. We went out to Second Sunday lunch, which we do every second Sunday. Kelly put it down at Going Nuts outside the door. About 5 minutes later, Ariana and her grandparents walk in to have lunch. She finds this rock. She comes in. She shows it to everybody sitting around the table. Is just so excited by this rock. She showed it to us before she left. She was eager to take it home. It just touched her life, and she had no idea that it came from here. And it was just really cool to see the way that little rock and the message, it didn't really care what it said. It just had, and it was beautiful, and she loved it, and she's treasuring that rock. And that happens all the time. I see those stories on Facebook, and we're a part of that. There we are making those survival bracelets. They're paracord, and if you get in a hitch and you need a piece of cord for something, you have it as a bracelet. You can unwind it real easy, and there you go. There we were making Christmas cards that Caroline took out to some of her patients through Coastal Hospice and their Compass program, and just brought cheer to their lives of something that we did. There we are making Grace Murdoch's kindness clips. You'll see more about them in another one. There's more rock painting. See, we just do all kinds of things and projects to be a blessing. We send teams out into the community. This was the help one Sunday that we did at the newest community garden in Salisbury, the Waterside Community Garden. We were filling those beds, and that was just a beautiful day to work outside there. Another place we went was, this is a homeless camp. There's a tent there to the right of that picture, and this is what happens when homeless people who don't have trash collection, who live in the woods, carry it in, eat it, consume it, and then it just becomes something that gets left there in this woods where they're living. And there were 2 camps, a number of, 5, 6, 7, 8 people and 2 dogs that were living here in this community. And we picked up 35 bags of trash that day and several bags of propane canisters, and we didn't put a dent in it. It still looked like this when we left. And it probably looks even worse now. And these people are not people that are in our shelters. They never come in. They stay there year round. And so we became friends with 2 of them in that experience for that moment. And they greatly appreciated what we did. They were so appreciative that when we left, remember Angie? She prayed for us. That was really cool. You see, when you're an agent of blessing in the community, people who normally get pushed to the sides and put down by the church and looked down on by society, when they're made to feel important and worthy and valued, they pray for you. They welcome you into their humble abode. It's a beautiful thing to create goodwill. And so we're into the shelter mode right now. This was last year here. There's the bags that we made at one of the Be a Blessing Sundays. We open our space, and we have since 2008. In fact, this building, when we bought it, it had pews in here, and we got rid of them because we had the chairs, but also because I really wanted us to be a homeless shelter. And now the homeless shelter has grown beyond our capacity, so we rented a place, a warehouse that has all 40 guys in it. This is really, really cool. It's the second year it's happened. This is last year's picture. The gentleman, not in the picture, because I was in that picture, but I am friends with one of the assistant managers at Lowe's. And the employees of Lowe's, not Lowe's Corporation, but the employees of Lowe's, he came to me last year and said, we want to gift the homeless shelter 2 weeks worth of lunches. I said, that's really cool, because that's an expensive venture. And then this year, he came and said the same thing. And then they got 4 other businesses to partner with them in this and provide some of the lunch things. And then he said, I'm going to bring toilet paper and paper towels and cleaning supplies. And he says, do you have a need for a refrigerator at the warehouse? And I said, oh, no. And then I talked to some of the ladies, and they said, yep, we need a refrigerator. And so I went back to him and said, we could use a refrigerator. And I thought they had a scratch and dent or, something old in the back that they were just going to bring and loan to us. They brought a brand new refrigerator and took it out of the box and hooked it up. It didn't even have the handles on it. They put the handles on and hooked it up, and it's there for us to use in these 2 weeks, and they'll take it back. And I don't know what they'll do. And they had made arrangements for us to have a big bullet size heater, kerosene heater that blows a lot of heat, because I wasn't sure how this warehouse was going to be. He had set it aside with my name on it, said, it's $300. I'll give it to you for $125. And when I went to pick it up on Friday, it wasn't there. He said, oh, I'm sorry. Somebody put it back out on the floor and it got sold. So he gifted us with 2 propane heaters, or not propane, kerosene heaters like you would have in a house. That was like you have in a shop. And they're quiet. They're not loud like that. And so, we ended up not needing them, but we have these 2 that we have if we need, because the generosity of Lowe's. Isn't that cool? When does local businesses come to the church and say, hey, we want to be a part of what you're doing? I'll tell you when. It's when we're creating goodwill in our community, when we're agents of blessing, and when people see what we're doing in the lives of our community. It's not when we're putting down and pushing out and pointing fingers, but it's when we're agents of blessing in our world. And so that's what happened. It's happened last year, and it's happening this year. And, I'm so proud of our youth and the ways in which they serve and engage in what we do and lead us in other ways. Here they are serving one night at the shelter last year. And they just do all kinds of things that live out the values that we teach here at Community of Joys, the values of Jesus. Our connection at the Camden Community Garden has given me an opportunity to speak in settings that I would never, as a local church pastor, be invited into. And it's been amazing. I can't tell you how many Salisbury University classes I spoke to last year. This is the honors group. There were about 50 honors students here that I got to tell the Camden Community Garden story, and I always start with the church and the collective of churches and the beauty that happens when churches work together. And then the environmental students came down to the garden from SU to let me talk to them there in the garden and to see it and ask questions and be engaged. And then I got to speak at Parkside High School for the VOTEC, the CTE program, the Parent Advisory Committee. And my seat was right here at the head of the table. They wanted me to share a little bit about the Camden Community Garden and the things that we're doing there. This was really cool. The Greater Salisbury Committee, this is in their conference room. Last year they had a monthly gathering of young leaders, professional leaders in the community that they wanted to expose to different aspects of our community. And so they invited me to come and be a part of a panel of 3 people to talk about agriculture in our community, because I'm engaged in the Camden Community Garden, not because I grew up on a 4,000-acre farm. So sitting next to me in the middle in the white shirt is Randy Day. Randy Day is our mayor, Jake Day's dad, but even more than that, Randy Day is the president and CEO of Purdue Farms. And there I am, a lowly church pastor, sitting next to the president and CEO of Purdue Farms. And next to him is County Councilman Matt Holloway from the Hebron-Mardella area, who has turned his family farm into what's called Baywater Farms. And they have a 4-acre hydroponic greenhouse where they grow all kinds of fresh vegetables for service here in our local community. And they have 1,000 acres that they grow sod and fresh, all kinds of neat, odd vegetables that they grow. And it, was neat to be a part of that panel to share what we're doing in our community. And it's all because we're agents of blessing and we're creating goodwill in our community that I was invited to that table. This is after the greater Salisbury conference room has been redone. They decided that they wanted to hang 30 by 40 canvases around their conference center. And so there, beginning on the left, is the Salisbury Festival at night, the Ferris wheel. Then is a shot of the harbor down towards Brew River at a sunset, Assateague ponies, the 4th of July fireworks. And then look, there's the Camden Community Garden. We were asked to have that photo taken so that they could hang it on the wall. And then there's New Year's Eve. So, local community icons, we have become one in the greater Salisbury community, our committee conference center. When does the church get invited into those settings, brothers and sisters? The church gets invited into them when we're agents of blessing, when we create goodwill in our community, not when we push people down, push people aside, and point fingers. And man, our exposure has been really phenomenal this year. We have brought our involvement in the Camden Community Garden has brought great exposure in a variety of realms. This is the cover of the February 23, 2017, Salisbury Independent, which is a weekly newspaper. There's our two mentees next to me, and Mayor Jake Day and Susan Phillips in front of the house that is going to become the Newton Street Community Center. And there's a picture that was inside later in the summer of me and one of the students from Pinehurst working the Camden Community Garden. And there we are at the end of the year on the cover again. That cover that was on in February was on in December on the 28th as a part of the 2017 year in review. And there was a segment in the article about the work of the Camden Community Garden, the Summer Lunch, Community of Joy Church, and the new and coming community center and our role in that. And then in the summer, the very first day of summer lunch at the garden, the Daily Times sent a reporter and a photographer out, and they took pictures, and we had the front cover of the Daily Times and the inside. I didn't put that picture up, but we were the inside. Then the Global Food Initiative of the Church of the Brethren, a part of our agency that I'm going to talk about more, our denomination I'm going to talk about more, did a partnership poster, and there we are on the front of that. Because they've partnered with us. They've given us $7,000 to be used in the various community gardens that we've established and been a part of here in Salisbury. And then on our denominational magazine, on inside the front cover of, May 2017 issue, there's the Camden Community Garden in its infancy. And then on the 2018 Church of the Brethren calendar, there's a little blurb. The last bullet point in that little blurb says, in the U.S., community gardeners are getting together to collaborate, and the spotlight on their work gives them inspiration. I pray it will stir churches to think about Jesus' mission in new ways, says a pastor in Maryland. Salisbury, Maryland, to be exact. You see the influence and the spheres of our influence when we're agents of blessing and when we're creating goodwill in our community and in our world. And then my seminary contacted me last year and said, we want you to get a picture of you in the garden, and we want to create this long banner that's going to hang, and we're going to feature 4 alumni every year, and we want you to be a part of the inaugural class of alumni. And I mean, that's huge. Now, they spelled my name wrong, and this isn't the final banner. They're still in the process of getting that. I don't know where it is. I need to ask my contact there if it's been developed, because the caliber of picture that I sent them was so great that it blew up and looked really nice, because I had a professional photographer donate his services, Stephen DiCarlo. He said he would do it for free, and because of all the work that we're doing in the community. And the other people had just a person take their picture and it wasn't the same quality. And the president said to me at annual conference, he said, we decided we don't want those pictures. We're asking them to get professional pictures taken because you set the bar of the and that's exactly what he said. So I don't know if it went up, but they did spell my name wrong and they are redoing it. I don't know if it's been redone. Then this was something really cool. Tammy Brown's sister, Terry Era, sent me this letter, this manila envelope, and I opened it up, and inside's this magazine, and I'm looking at it. It's a Maryland Municipalities magazine. And I thought, why in the world is Terry sending me this magazine? And there was this little flag, and so I flipped to the page the flag was, and there, lo and behold, is a 2-page spread about Salisbury and a picture of us in the Camden Community Garden, Mayor Jake Day and Susan Phillips and the community center behind. And the Maryland municipalities had caught wind of what we're doing, and they featured it as a part of an article on Salisbury. You see what happens when we're agents of blessing and create goodwill in our community? And then, I'm not a chef. I love to cook, but Lisa Bryant not WBOC anymore. She's at Delmarva Life. She contacted me and said, "Hey, Martin, we want you to do a cooking segment on Delmarva Life. You and Susie, bring some stuff from the garden." I'm like, "Really? Come on! I don't want to do that. I'll come and talk about the garden, but I don't want to do cooking." And she said, "No, we want you to do cooking. You can talk about the garden all you want, but we want you to do cooking." So Susie and I did bruschetta. You just chop up tomatoes and you chop up basil and you put it together, a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. Thank you. And you make this wonderful spread. And so there we are with Jimmy Hoppa and Lisa on the set doing this bruschetta from the Camden Community Garden. It was a wonderful thing. Every year in the fall and in the spring at Community of Joy, we do a love feast. And a love feast is a meal, a time of communion, and then a time of washing one another's feet. In the spring of this year, we decided to take it outside the walls. And so we had communion set up here, and we invited you to come and receive communion, and then to go out and meet us at the Camden Community Garden, where we had it carried in the things for dinner, and we ate dinner with anyone who came from the neighborhood, and it was a beautiful experience. And then we worked side by side with whoever came in the garden. That was the feet washing piece. And so here are the kids that were there the night when I showed up to bring supper, and they wanted to know what they could do. And so here they are engaged in this process of gardening, and then they stayed with us all night and worked side by side with us as we washed one another's feet, as we served our community as Jesus called us to do. Then our youth, what a neat youth program we have here. Thanks to Belinda and Tammy and Greg, our youth leaders, the impact and the influence that you're having on our children is huge. There they are, living out our values, cleaning up the community, picking up trash, and they did such a fine job that they won $250 in a contest of cleaning up Wicomico County. And that helps with them going to National Youth Conference. And then for the 150th anniversary of Wicomico County, Miss Tammy got them hooked up with outfits, and they walked around the streets of Salisbury and passed out things and greeted folks and just were a part of the 150th anniversary of Wicomico County. And then right before the Dance for Kindness, they took some of our kindness rocks down to the Kindness Garden, the rock garden in downtown Salisbury, and put them out. And then we were involved in the Dance for Kindness, which had about 300 people dancing to a song in the streets of Salisbury, all for kindness. We were also a part of a flash mob, and there we are in our freeze pose. And then there was a art display, a mass art display, and our youth made this several board long display to be a part of. There were like 50, 60 boards there that had kindness messages on them. And what impresses me about this is they sat and painstakingly somebody cut out pieces of magazines in colors that are similar, and then they put it all back together and made this beautiful sign: high five, smile, no bullies, support, community of joy, love, hugs, taking it out, laughter, serving others. Isn't that cool? And I don't know where that is, but I walked in Pinehurst Elementary School the other day, and there were several of these from that day exhibited in the hallways around, sharing this message of kindness where it needs to be shared. And then our youth, the neat things. They applied for a grant from a Good Old Boys Foundation. I never heard of them before in my life, but they granted our kids $500, and our kids decided that they were going to use that $500 to adopt 10 children from Pinehurst Elementary School to do Christmas for them. And there they are shopping for them. And then there they are wrapping the presents. You see what happens when we create an atmosphere and an environment of being a blessing? It becomes contagious, that even our youth, and a lot of churches, where do youth engage? Not in the same things the church does, most often. But here, look at it. It's cool. And then, I met this guy, and he wanted to do a blessing of the bikes, and I don't remember what the weather event was, but he promoted it far and wide, and it was supposed to be hundreds of bikes, and then this weather event came through, and he canceled it, and he forgot to put it out there on any other networks. And so as we were finishing up worship one day, I heard all these bikes start coming up, and there were 8 bikes, I think, that day. Came up, and it happened to be a friend of mine who I knew and his 7 friends who I didn't know, and they wanted to be a part of the blessing of the bikes, which was supposed to be after worship. And so I went out there and I said, "Hey guys, I'm really sorry, but this has been canceled, and I'm not responsible for that. The guy that's responsible for it just canceled it. I wouldn't have canceled it. It wasn't raining. It wasn't bad at all." And I said, "But since you're here, I'll do a blessing." And so I did a blessing, and they were happy and rode off. And I've seen that friend a couple of times since, and he's been grateful. And, Community of Joy just always is interested in reaching outside of our box and moving outside of our comfort zones and engaging with people who aren't maybe like us. And so one of our Be a Blessing projects, our 2017 Joy Fest, ended up on a Be a Blessing Sunday. And so we sent teams of children and people out into the neighborhood to hand out invitations for our Be a Blessing, or our Joy Fest. And so there they were, and there's the fire company that comes willingly, eagerly comes to this. And then there's our master chefs fixing the pulled pork. And did we do chicken this year? I thought we did. And then we did face painting, and we're engaging with people from Pinehurst and neighbors far and wide. And then, we connected with our friend Grace Murdoch, and that's a neat story in and of itself. She was Emma's elementary school dean of students. And I hadn't seen her since then until 2016 when we did a TED Talk together, and she's doing this kindness initiative in Salisbury. And so we've been fanning her flame and encouraging her in that initiative. We made kindness clips that she sells, and I don't know how many we've made, but probably 100 or better. And she makes, I think, $3 off of them. And those funds have brought Leon Logothetis here. Leon is a British guy who decided that he wanted to travel the world on kindness. He didn't take any money. He didn't take credit cards. He didn't take anything. He just went on kindness, and expecting that wherever he went, he would find somebody who was kind enough to let him come into their house and sleep, and kind enough to offer him meals and what he needed. And he's written a book about those experiences called The Kindness Diaries. And he came to talk to local middle schools and high schools, and Grace brought him here, and some of the money that was made from those kindness clips is responsible for that. And in addition, then, and earlier in the spring, in April, I think, Bob Votruba and his dog Bogart brought the 1 Million Acts of Kindness bus here. It parked in our lot. They're coming back in April and going to park it in our lot for a week as he goes across the pond, the big pond, to England. And he's going to give me the keys and said, "You can ride it around wherever you want." I don't think I'll do that, but I am going to move it so it doesn't burn the grass. And he was here in our community, and he and Bogart spoke in schools about encouraging children to think about doing acts of kindness regularly, and encourage them to set the goal of doing 1 million acts of kindness in their life. He came to the Camden Community Garden with Bogart, and that's one of our 9 o'clockers, Sharon Hoffman and myself. And then Mayor Jake Day came and was in a photo op. Mayor Jake Day finds his way to lots of things that we do. And again, isn't it interesting that a community leader cheers on and supports the work of the church? I mean, he's a church person, but it's not kosher pretty much for that to happen. But because we are agents of blessing, and because we're creating goodwill in our community, we find him all kinds of places. Another thing that Grace did, she brought in Orly Waba, who's the founder of the Dance for Kindness, and she wrote this book called The Kindness Diaries. She was here and spoke to several high schools in December. You see the circles just overlap. Here's the administration from Pinehurst at summer lunch for the garden, meeting the children from their school. And there you can see one of our mentees in the center. And then there's Pinehurst students from the after school club. They came and planted all of our tomatoes this year, and they engaged in the garden. They were eating lettuce there. They're looking at peas here. And then there was a special ed class from Pinehurst who came and planted all of our herbs this year, our whole herb bed. And then we went back and we made strawberry pie. And when I see those students, even now in the lunch, they come up and say, "Hey, I know you." And then we've engaged with the neighbors, and this has got a couple of staff members and former students from Pinehurst Elementary School that came out on a garden work night, and engaged neighbors hugely. And the kids, they absolutely love the carrots and the other aspects of the garden. Look at those smiles, even for the dirty carrots. We've partnered with a number of agencies in our community this summer. At the summer lunch, we partnered with Salisbury Art Space. They brought art a couple of times a week. And the little girl in the middle, Marie, painted this on the day of our concluding barbecue. And she was quite proud of this welcome to the barbecue. And it's quite an artistic. And then they had a contest to do paint Pastor Martin, and Isai drew me, and I think he did a pretty darn good job. He got the hat, and he got Community of Joy written on, I'm wearing this shirt. He got that. Then his sister did one of me. Her perspective of the hat wasn't quite the same as his eyes, but she had, there I am. And then the little sister wanted to get in on it, and she had a little bit of help, but there she made me as well. And then as I did Miss Susie and I standing in the garden. That's the shed and the garden beds, and Miss Susie and I there. And then there's Mayor Jake Day again. He just shows up and supports the work that we do, and he loves what we do. And the city is paying for all of the water for all of our community gardens because he sees the impact of what we're doing. And there he is giving a high five. When does a city official get involved in the work of the church or invite the church into realms that have an impact in the community? It doesn't happen very often, but it's happening here because we are an agent of blessing and we're creating goodwill in our community. We consulted with a number of communities. This is Delmar. They wanted to do a community garden. I don't know what's happened. They came and talked to me, and I gave them lots of ideas, and so I don't know if they did it or not. We consulted with a group in Princess Anne at the Garland Hayward Center. This was after the ribbon cutting of their garden, which is behind the crowd. They've now doubled it. I consulted with them, and they invited me down to be a part of that ribbon cutting, and it's just beautiful. And to see those children and the excitement that they have when they engage in the garden is just phenomenal. And again, we're creating goodwill in our community. We're agents of blessing. This is summer lunch, where we do a project and serve lunch and create relationships with kids in our community and parents in our community, and it's just an absolutely beautiful thing. And we bring the police officers to summer lunch to break down walls that exist in our community between people and police. And I have several of their cell numbers, and we text back and forth and engage. And if I need something at the garden, I can call or text them, and they'll be coming. It's just amazing. And those connections and those things happen only because we're creating goodwill in our community and we're agents of blessing. And then, I believe our community is beautiful when we involve all people from all walks of life. This is the Lower Shore Enterprise. They came every week, once a week, to work in the garden. Lower Shore Enterprise, if you don't know, is an agency in our community who works to employ or get adults with disabilities employed or engaged in our community in volunteer projects if they can't be employed. And they came to our community garden at Camden, and they also went to Waterside and helped every week this summer. And it was a beautiful experience. It touched me. Was contacted by a person from the Blind Industries of Maryland, wondering if they could bring blind teenagers to work in the garden. And I'm like, I don't know. How's that work? They want to pick tomatoes. Well, how do they? She said, well, they feel. They feel which ones you set them in the right direction, and they feel until they feel one that you tell them the soft ones are ripe, and they feel, and they have a great sense. And so they came, and we worked for a whole day. And it was amazing to watch him. The young man, I think his name was Adam in the green, he was pushing a wheelbarrow through the garden, and he can't see. And somebody who could see walked in front of him and talked to him the whole time, and he just followed their voice. It was just absolutely amazing. And you see the beautiful things that happen in our community when we don't push people down, push people aside, point fingers, but we're agents of blessing and create goodwill in our community. Salisbury University has a program that every freshman has to be engaged in a community engagement project in our community, and we are on the list. And I get calls every spring from freshmen who need to come and engage in the Camden Community Garden because they have to do it for a project and they have to write up about it, and they're eager to learn. And I always start with the story about the church when I tell the story, and I always tell the story before we start any work. And, how can you resist that? We planted flowers, and the kids love them, and they love to pick them and give them. That's an act of kindness. That's an act of, and look at the smiles that it brings. I mean, it's partly covering it up, but you can see the smile there. We were represented with a display 2 tables wide, Camden Community Garden, Wacomico Grows Kindness, which is Grace Murdoch's thing, and Community of Joy at the Peace in the Park in September. And it wasn't all fun last year. We had this vandalism that took place out here in our little shed. And I thought it was homeless people that were sleeping in there that were doing this vandalism. And it turns out that it was youth in our community. I put up deer cameras. You're seeing a picture of a deer camera that it caught of the youth in the act of doing some of what they were doing, the mischief and vandalism. And so after I got their pictures, and I got lots of pictures, one day I put it out there on Facebook, and then one day a neighbor across the street called me and said, "Hey, your friends are back at your place." It was like 2:30 in the afternoon. I was at the garden. So I rode down here. I parked at Bethany Lutheran. I walked around the fence. I'm a hunter, so I know how to sneak up on people. They didn't even have a clue that I was anywhere around, and I got right there and when they finally saw me, they didn't think to run. They probably could have outrun me, but they didn't try. And I got them to tell me their names and where they lived. And I showed them these pictures, and I said, and the 2 guys that were here are in these pictures. And I said, "This is you." And I showed them all these pictures of all that I had. And I said, we know that you've done this damage. We don't want to press charges. We just want you to stop. We recognize that you need a place to stay and a place to hang and to have fun, and that you're bored. But we ask that you don't destroy. You're welcome to hang here during daylight hours anytime you want, but don't destroy. And after that, we never had another incident. That's because we're an agent of blessing, because we're creating goodwill. I didn't punish them. I didn't do what the world would normally do. We did it differently, and they respected it, and we've created goodwill even with them. Now, we've become known. I hope we're becoming known. I hear it some. I use it a lot, that we're the little church with a big heart, and we have room in our hearts for you. See the impact that we do in this community? It's huge. We're agents of blessing in huge ways. Now, there's a couple areas. There's 3 areas that I want us to grow in 2018. This was a picture that was taken at a concert that we did. We did 2 concerts together, but I want us to do more things like that organically, that get us together, that get us connecting. We're doing second Sunday lunch out. I wish people would be a part of that. I wish that we could invite one another to game nights or fun in our homes, just do things to be together and create a deeper connection, because I believe the strength of a church is in the connections that we have to God and to each other and then to our neighborhood. And so I hope in 2018 we're going to do more to deepen our connections with each other. That's this building, and this building doesn't look like that anymore. When we bought it, it looked horrible. We fixed it up tremendously right after we bought it, and it's in bad need of a lot of work. We need to paint inside, we need to paint outside, we need to redo the floor. If you go down the steps, there's paint peeling. We need to spend a lot of time this year getting this building fixed up. I want you to walk through this building and look at it from the eyes of someone who walked in for the first time. And I think you'd be embarrassed by what we see. And so we need to change that. We need to address this building, because it's important. It's not who we are. It's the building. It's the ministry center. We're the church. But it does make an impact on us. When you ride by and you see flaking paint and stuff that needs fixed, we just need to do that. And so we're going to in this year. And then finally, this is a group of community gardeners from the Church of the Brethren. And that picture is up there because in your program, you have a newsletter from the Global Food Initiative. There's more different newsletters in the back. And you also have a bumper sticker. I don't want you to put it on your bumper. I want to invite you to put it on a glass jar. And I want to invite you to throw your pocket change or do whatever kind of way you want to. Because one of the things we want to do here at Community of Joy is we want to become more global. We're doing a great job locally, but we want to be involved in being an agent of blessing in the global world as well. And so the Global Food Initiative is a Church of the Brethren initiative that has blessed us tremendously. They've given us $7,000 in our community effort, and they invited me and paid my way to go to annual conference. I'm going to New Orleans to see one of our community gardeners in March, and they're paying part of the way for that. And so this is a way that we can give back. They do all kinds of things in African countries, in various countries around the world. They're involved in food initiatives, helping to stamp out hunger. And I grew up in a family that my mother had this jar just like this with my 2 cents worth on it, and she contributed to it. And so the funds that she gave as a kid, we're seeing the benefit of some of that. And so wouldn't it be neat for us to be a part of that globally in the world? So I'm throwing my pocket change in. I got $1 in there. I've just started it. I'm going to keep it up. And when you get it full or when you feel like you're ready, don't bring the change. Turn it into either cash or turn it into a check. Take mercy on Gene, our treasurer, and just bring it in and mark on your envelope Global Food Initiative. And put it in there, and we'll send it in every so often to them, and it'll make an impact in our world in huge ways. We'll be an agent of blessing in places we'll never go to and with people we'll never see. But the fruit of that will change our world and make it be what God intends it to be. Brothers and sisters, I just can't say to you enough, thank you for being who you are. Thank you for your desire to be engaged in our community, to be a church that's different. To be a church that wants to be an agent of blessing and create goodwill in our community, not a church that wants to point fingers, push people down, and put people aside.